Hey guys, thanks for checking out the My Career Path podcast. Today we're going to be talking about New Year's resolutions and goals. And if you're like 80% of America, you've probably already given up. According to time.com, 80% of people fail to keep their New Year's resolutions by February. And so we're just getting into the later weeks of February, and most of us have probably forgotten, or we didn't even make them in the first place. So let's get into it. Okay, we're in the middle of February. So it's time to kind of reevaluate and reset ourselves. You don't need to wait for a new year. You don't need to wait for a new month. You don't need to wait for a new week. Heck, you don't even need to wait for a new day. It's time to get started now making those goals. Start now and start planning. Goals are critical to get to where you want to be. Without them, we're just simply wandering around and hoping we get to the right spot. I think for many people, goals leave a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth. This comes from not having achieved goals in the past, failing to achieve certain goals, or feeling like it's hopeless. Thinking they're unattainable and not worth the time and stress. Similar thought processes happen with budgets, in my opinion. Think to yourself how many times you've heard people say they hate budgeting or hate setting goals. Way more often than you would think. Why? Well, because it's so darn difficult. Changing habits and changing our life takes a lot of time and effort. We have to change our thinking in order to set these proper goals. Goals are a way of focusing our energy and attention in order to improve ourselves and better ourselves. We achieve more in our life and in our careers. Goals put facts behind our feelings. And here's what I mean by that. Think of your life right now. If you're anything like me, you feel pretty good about where you are, you're pretty content with where you're at, and you're pretty happy with where you're going. But how do we back those feelings up? We can't really do that unless we have something to measure it by. You can't measure feelings. It's not something that you could do with like inches, weight, anything like that. There's just nothing to measure it by because it's just how we feel, and it varies day to day. When I was in high school, I remember feeling I was really good at math. And I remember going, okay, math makes sense. I pick up the concepts fairly quickly. I think I'm fairly intelligent. And the only way I could back these facts up is by doing the assignments, doing the quizzes, taking the tests, and kind of seeing where the grade is. And that kind of put into perspective of where I was at. It backed up my feelings of, hey, I think I'm pretty good at math, to, yeah, my grade's doing pretty well. I'd say I'm good at math, as opposed to just kind of wandering around. And now that I'm out of school, and I'm out of high school, and even college, and I have my college degree, I feel that same way. I feel that way of, well, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. I think I'm doing pretty well, but I don't have anything to measure it against. It's just my thoughts. It's just my feelings. And so goals really help us to drill down into those to help us decide where we want to go and how we want to end up. They give us a way to measure our success. And that's where I think goal setting really comes into play. As we head into the middle of February and kind of thinking about what goals we want to set, again, goals are what we decide them to be. So I'll share a story about kind of how I came to decide what to do with this podcast. So I had the idea for making this podcast back in November 2022. I was at my in-laws' place, and I think I was listening to some motivational podcast, probably something like that. I just had the thought, I want to do something more. I've been trying to find some kind of a creative outlet that I can let my thoughts and feelings into. And I am not an artsy-fartsy person. I'm not one who could pick up a pen and paper. I'm not one who can really write eloquently. But as my wife will tell you, I do kind of like being a ham. I do kind of like being in the center of attention. So I decided, okay, maybe podcasting is what I would want to do. Kind of speaking to an audience. I'd like to think I'm good at public speaking. I've done it for most of my life. And I enjoy it. I enjoy having people to chat with and talk with. And that's another reason why. I wanted to talk with people about how they got their careers. And it kind of tied into what I wanted to do. So when I had the idea to make this podcast, I had to start figuring out what I wanted to achieve, how I wanted to reach that goal of launching a podcast and making a show. So for the next 3 months, from November up until just a few weeks ago, pretty much, I was writing down, okay, what do I want it to look like? How do I want it to sound? How do I get it to reach people? And I just jotted everything down. I didn't know anything about microphones. I didn't know anything about editing software. I had no idea how to upload a podcast to Apple or any website. I didn't even know how to build a website. But that was things that I had to kind of set for myself in order to do. I took an Excel sheet and wrote out all of my ideas, everything I wanted to accomplish and achieve. And I wrote it out for a whole year. after listening to a couple of other content creators and things like that, I wanted to lay out a year plan because that would give me enough time to really try it out, really delve into it, kind of learn the ins and outs, put real time into it so that I could actually figure out, is this something I want to continue with and do? And then I took that yearly kind of how I wanted to do everything. I took that year forecast and year goals and I said, okay, let's break it down into quarters. I wanted to get some episodes recorded. I wanted to write out which episodes I wanted to record, what thoughts I had, and what people I wanted to interview. And I broke it down into that quarterly goal. And that's what I have hanging up right here when I'm talking about my podcast. I have my yearly goal written down of 50 episodes a year to give me good experience on actually making the episodes and talking about them. And then I broke it down into quarterly goals and said, okay, for the next 3 months, this is what I want to achieve. And then I think the most important part for me is having my weekly review session. So every Sunday, I kind of look over, okay, this is what this last week has been. This is what I've worked on. This is what I wanted to achieve. How well did I do? And that weekly goal planning session is really important for me because it kind of helps me set my focus. Throughout the week, I'm constantly moving things around depending on what happens. I may get off my full-time job late. I may get home late. I may spend more time, watching TV with my wife. I have to end up moving things around a lot more throughout the week. But I have control over that because I'm the one that sets the goals. And so I still have my weekly goals are focused on what quarterly goals can I get done this week? What episodes can I record? Who can I interview? And how can I get that done? So for you, I would encourage you to also set those kinds of goals. Break it down into what you want to achieve over this next year. Here's a quote from Bill Gates. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So as people, it's part of our nature. We suck at goal setting. We suck at short-term goals and we suck at long-term goals. Now, that doesn't mean we should just give up on it. It just means it takes a lot more effort to actually achieve those things, especially when we're not used to it. Like I said earlier, changing habits and changing our behavior is difficult. It's not something that can just happen overnight. We can have the thought to do it, but then it's kind of a constant battle day in and day out to actually change and to make those alterations in our lives and in our careers. A big part of my full-time job is actually setting these kind of quarterly goals for our employees. We oversee about 5 to 6 employees, something like that. And every quarter we have these goals. Now what these goals are is the owners of the company have decided that we set quarterly goals. If those goals are achieved, then a 10% bonus is awarded. So we want to incentivize people to achieve more, and it's more of a reward program rather than a punishment program. We want people to feel incentivized to do more and work hard to achieve these goals, which I think works really well and something that I've really liked. And it also just kind of helps us tune in to what the yearly forecast is. At the beginning of every year, we have a management meeting that we go over what are we going to achieve for 2023? What's the main things we want to have happen and how can we make those happen? And then I take those and the COO takes those and we discuss them and we break them down into how are we going to achieve these? When are we going to achieve these? And can we do this? And I'll be honest, at the beginning of every year, it's really intimidating to see all of these goals and go, wow, that's a lot. As you continually break them down into smaller and smaller pieces, then they become so much more manageable. Now, that doesn't mean we always achieve the goals. It doesn't mean we always hit everything. It at least helps us tune in and focus on what we want to actually achieve. One of the last things I want to touch on is kind of going back to my budget discussion that I was sharing earlier. How budgets and goals kind of leave the same sour taste in people's mouths. I don't like a budget. I hate talking about the budget. I hate setting goals. I don't like talking about the goals. And I think it's just because it's really difficult to stick with something. It's difficult to change, like I said earlier. But really what it comes down to is we have control over those goals. We get to decide what those goals end up looking like. We get to decide what the budget looks like. Dave Ramsey talks about it all the time. A budget is as freeing as you set it to be. You create the budget. You are the one in charge of the budget. It's only when you finally finalize it and go, this is what we're going to do, that it starts to feel a little constricting. And it's the same thing with goals. You get to decide how much or how little you want to achieve. It could be as simple as, hey, I just want to read a page of a book every day. That seems pretty simple, pretty manageable. Or it could be, I want to read a book every month. I want to read a book every week. It really just comes down to what you decide is important and what you want to focus on. Because ultimately, you are what the secret ingredient is. You're the secret sauce. You decide what you want to accomplish. You get to work towards those goals. So like I said at the beginning, you don't need to wait for a new year, new month, new week, new day. Start today. Figure out what you want to work on. Figure out what you want to achieve and start setting a plan. Start small. I would always encourage you to kind of start small and ramp up as you go. The smaller you start, the easier it'll be. Because as you start getting those goals and as you start working towards them, then it just kind of starts to snowball. You start actually seeing achievements. You start actually seeing those things checked off. And that's a real motivation boost. Let me tell you, from my own personal experience, when I have my little board here that I get to look at and I get to say, okay, what do I need to achieve today? What do I need to accomplish? And then I get to check it off every day. That works for me. It may not work for you, but that's what works for me, is writing down exactly what I want to achieve. And you got to break it down into as smallest pieces as you can. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Let me know what goals you guys have for yourselves by going to my website, mycareerpathpodcast.com. Just drop me a line and let me know what goals you have set for yourself. Let's make 2023 an awesome year for goal setting. Take care, you guys.